across Eleanor Graham when I was researching my walk around the Chingford Rise estate. Well, it was a collaborative walk last year, and I live in Buxton Road, and I thought I'd go through the census or find my past. You can do a reverse image search, a reverse, I'm not quite with it, a reverse address search. And I thought I'd start at number 1 Buxton Road and go through the road and see if I came across anyone interesting. Well, I didn't get beyond number 1, because you can see here the top person, P.A. Graham, journalist and author. And so I'll tell you more about him in a moment. And he's living there with his wife and his 6 children, their 6 children. And you can see, if you look on the right-hand column, the variety of places of birth of the children. So they did move around a bit. The 2 eldest, Stephen and Isabella, were born in Edinburgh. Jessie was born in Haringey, and the 3 youngest, Annie, Cuthbert and Eleanor, were born in Walthamstow. So Eleanor Graham was born at this house, 18 Grosvenor Park Road. It's got a blue plaque on it, a Waltham Forest plaque, but to somebody else. Beryl Swain. Beryl Swain was the first female to ride solo in the Isle of Man TT race and lived there in the early 60s. The mural that you can see underneath the plaque, that stood until recently outside the Duke pub in Wood Street. Sadly, I mean, I'm just terrible. It's been painted over. It's got a really generic mural there now, which is such a shame. So the family, so the Graham family were in Walthamstow, not necessarily at that same house. I haven't managed to find out the exact dates, but they were in Walthamstow from the dates of birth from 1892. But for the 1891 census, they were in Hornsey. So for the 1901 census, as I've already mentioned, they were at number 1 Buxton Road. I'm sure you might know this house. And this postcard, image courtesy of John King, shows Buxton Road in the early 1900s. And I found this when archiving postcards. And actually, in the newsletter that's just been published, there's an article written by me about another postcard I found. You wouldn't believe what you could find in postcards. And I think the first house with the pointed roof is probably number 1. So Peter Anderson Graham, 1853 to 1925, was Eleanor's, where's that coming from? Was Eleanor's father, and he was editor of Country Life from 1900 until his death in 1925. Unfortunately, he led a bit of a double life. In 1902, he left the family home for a younger woman and had 2 children with her. On the other side of London, he went to great lengths to control the way others perceived him. So he was like editing Country Life, but having this double life. He never divorced Jane. And what I found interesting, so I took this image from British newspaper archives, that until the 1940s, this was the front page of Country Life. It was full of adverts, which, you know, not how you imagine Country Life magazine to be today. But I thought that's for another day. I won't research that any further. He also had, there's a bit of a, you know, this is a bit of an interesting family because they got up to lots of no good. In October 1900, he appeared at the Old Bailey for publishing a false defamatory libel upon the Sanitary Inspector of England in a book called The Revival of English Agriculture. I have to say, I haven't really looked into it. I thought, that's for another day as well. So, on a public retraction and apology, the prosecution offered no evidence and he was found not guilty. And that didn't seem to affect his job at Country Life. The 1911 census shows his wife still there, still described as married, with Cuthbert, Eleanor and Isabella, and Jane's widowed mother. 2 members of the family were still there 10 years later, in 1921. I realise you probably can't read this in great detail, but that in 1921, Jane and the daughter Isabella. 1939, the family had gone. Eleanor was educated locally at what is now Chingford Foundation School, then at the North London Collegiate School for Girls, which at that time was in Camden. She then studied at the London School of Medicine, but decided against a career in medicine and left the school in 1916. Eleanor's oldest sibling, Stephen, 12 years her senior, was also an author. He travelled extensively in Russia, and it's just a couple of the books he wrote. These are all, I've forgotten what website it is, but you can download these for free online if you're interested in the history of Russia. He was schooled at Sir George Monarch's School. He also wrote a number of novels which were basically real-life events, thinly disguised. His 1922 novel, Under London, which I have actually started reading, details his life growing up in North East London, and although most street and place names are fictional, you can definitely recognise parts of Walthamstow and Chingford from the descriptions. His 1934 novel, The Lost Battle, details the complexity of his early life. The fictional characters were based on his parents, but the actual stories, some of the stories weren't true. However, he came unstuck with his 1937 novel, African Tragedy, when again he used real people thinly disguised. These people then sued him, as the fictional parts he had portrayed them as undesirable characters. The publishers Rich and Cowan paid damages to the plaintiffs and withdrew the book from circulation. So all copies of that book were pulped. And that did affect him. He didn't write another novel for 17 years. 1921 census, 14 Royal Mansions, Croydon, and Eleanor is a visitor. It says that she works for, she joins Lady Muriel Paget's mission to Czechoslovakia. It actually says, I can't remember the actual wording, but it says out of work. It's got that she was with that mission, but she was out of work at that time. So she had joined this mission in the early 1920s, travelled widely to distribute aid in the countryside until, unfortunately, she caught typhoid fever only after 6 months and had to return home. Then from 1927 until 1931, Eleanor worked at Bumpus Bookshop in Oxford Street as head of the new children's room. So this site, it later moved further west down Oxford Street and was still there in the 50s. I'm not sure if anyone's old enough to remember. I've got one person. So I'm not actually sure when it closed. But this original site, I mean, it's quite close, if you know that, that's Marylebone Lane, really close to the Elizabeth line exit for Bond Street. And it's just such a historic site. And this map on the right-hand side shows you that some of the writing shows it was the site of the Tyburn Church, so the very first church in that area, and later as the parish courthouse, and both are shown on that OS map, although this map is much later, I think 1850s. It's showing what was there before. So John Bumpus was a bookseller listed in the Holborn area around 1815. He overcame an insolvency, but later drowned himself. His son John carried on the trade, and in 1853 opened the Oxford Street branch, while his brother Edward carried on in Holborn. In the mid-1930s, as I said, Bumpus moved to 477 Oxford Street. So this shows the interior of the shop in the 1890s. So other than growing up in a literary family where her mother read to them regularly, her mother tended to read adult, novels, classics to them, but cut out the bits that weren't suitable for children's ears. So apart from that, Eleanor had no experience of children's books or indeed of bookselling. It was her brother Stephen who heard about the role from the manager J.G. Wilson. She confided in Wilson that she knew nothing of children's books and received the comforting reply that no one else did either. It was here that she learned from others and did much to improve the type of literature and non-fiction available to children. She even advised authors such as Arthur Ransome to include illustrations in Swallows and Amazons to help sales. I've got no idea what the time is, by the way. Am I? All right, good, good. So after leaving Bumpers, she worked for a time in a private library. By 1934, her reviews were appearing monthly in the Sunday Times. She then continued her career by working as children's book editor for William Heinemann and then Methuen. So the bookseller, this is another one that's on the British Newspaper Archive. This edition from September 1938 includes reviews by her of children's books. And amazingly, they take up almost 67 pages of this edition. I mean, I just didn't expect that, going through it, thinking it can't be the whole, it's almost the whole publication. 1939, unfortunately, for most of the records I've got, she's a visitor or staying with somebody, which is really annoying. 1939, she's staying with her brother Stephen at number 60 Frith Street. You can see it on the map on the right. It's an orange box towards the middle bottom. So Eleanor, on the 1939 register, it doesn't actually give you the relationship, and it doesn't say visitor. It doesn't say anything, annoyingly. But she's described as writer, author, critic. She's also listed on the electoral roll at this address in 1937, 38 and 39. Living there also at the time was Vera Mitrinovich, journalist, Stephen's companion, who later became his wife in 1956, after the death of his first wife, Rosa, in Somerset. So though Stephen and Rosa had been separated for a long time, like his father before him, they never divorced. And Stephen, I couldn't find when Vera died, but Stephen lived there from 1912 until his death in 1975, aged 91. I wonder actually if anyone, I know there's an actor with the same name, Stephen Graham, but if anyone ever heard of Stephen Graham, the author? He's prolific, he's written so many books. And this image shows Stephen with his second wife Vera outside 60 Frith Street in 1957. So Eleanor often visited Stephen during the war as she could take refuge from the bombs in the cellar of his house. She had a flat in nearby Bloomsbury and she didn't have such a luxury. Her Bloomsbury flat was at 17 Queen Court, Queen Square. And when I looked at this, I have to say I hadn't been there. Although, weirdly, I've walked past this loads and loads of times, never noticed it somehow. And this is such an amazing blue plaque on the house, on the block of flats. But that's for another day. That's the story for another day. But he was probably there at the same time she was. This is the entrance in Guildford Street, by the way. It's sort of double-sided. The address is Queen Square, but this is round the back. So I don't know the exact date she was there, but I found she'd written a letter to the Spectator, which I found in the Spectator archive, dated 1952. So she was, definitely there at that point. In 1940, Eleanor was working in a wartime job at the Board of Trade. That autumn, Alan Lane, who had founded Penguin Books 5 years earlier, rang her saying he was ready to start Puffin storybooks. There had already been some Puffin picture books in 1940. So after work one day, because she said to him, I'm working, I can't take time off. So she went there after work, visited him at his home in Colnbrook near Slough, arriving in a blackout. She told Lane that she was only interested in being the editor of the best new work for children. She had long campaigned for better quality children's books. He agreed with her. She was their first editor, so it's really Puffin storybooks. That was who she worked for, and remained in that position until her retirement in 1961. She was determined that the Puffin imprint should always signify quality, and it should not just be reprints of classics. The first 5 titles appeared in December 1941, Wurzel Gummidge being one of the early ones. But it doesn't look very attractive to children, does it? So Eleanor recognised this fact, and it wasn't too long before they became more colourful. The Puffin puzzle book on the right, published 1944, was the first to have a more colourful cover. Despite the wartime paper shortage and booksellers' doubts about the cheap new series, Puffin achieved a list of 32 titles by 1946. They were quite lucky. They had a big stock of paper, and actually were able to, sometimes permissions were hard to obtain because some people looked down on the fact that they would be published as a paperback, but some of the hardback publishers who were unable to get the paper to publish their edition sold their book rights to Puffin, so they would at least be reprinted during the war to keep the titles alive. She didn't always get it right, though. In 1957, 20 years after its publication and a favourable reception, she turned down publication rights for The Hobbit, as she thought it was too violent. She also refused to publish Enid Blyton's books. These were, however, both taken on by her successor, Kay Webb. Eleanor always worked from home in Queen Square and rarely went to the offices in Harmondsworth. Eleanor was an author too. Her book, The Children Who Lived in a Barn, was published in 1938. And the one on the right, I wonder how many people in the audience had a copy of this. I definitely did, a Puffin book of verse. On her retirement in 1961, she moved from London to Loughton, but remained a respected authority on children's books for the rest of her life. I've spent far too long, but I can't find where she lived in Loughton. I'm still looking. Anyway, so this, and her life isn't really as well documented as her brother. There's a whole book about her brother, and it's all online. There's so much, their brother Stephen, that is. So this image is taken from The Story of Puffin Books by Sally Gritton. But annoyingly, it doesn't say where this image came from. In 1973, Eleanor received the Children's Book Circle Eleanor Fargen Award for services to children's literature. Her successor at Puffin, Kay Webb, had won the award 3 years earlier in 1970 after she introduced the Puffin Club. And in case you don't know, I'm sure you might not know the name Eleanor Fargen, but she was a poet, a children's writer, and wrote the poem Morning Has Broken. I'm sure you do know that. Eleanor died in 1984 at Hereford Lodge Hospice in Bayswater. I shouldn't really make a joke at this point, but the name of this lodge, this hospice, it had moved, and its previous name was St Luke's House for the Dying Poor, and they changed the name to Hereford Lodge Hospice because they thought the name was too depressing. But I thought, I have to tell you that. So she was cremated at Kensal Green Cemetery. And that's all I've got to say. I've got no idea if the timing, but this is me. If anyone's interested, and if you can't make the date for the Chingford Historical Society visit to the town hall, I do these town hall visits once a month, normally on the third Sunday. Any questions?
Just, is it Project Gutenberg?
One moment.
Oh, sorry. Is it Project Gutenberg?
I think it is.
For the books?
Yeah.
Any other questions, please, for we've got some interest here. That's good. I like to see that.
No idea what the time is.
If she lived in Frith Street,
Sorry. Yeah.
if she lived in Frith Street, was she considered part of the Bloomsbury set?
Well, Frith Street's Soho, so it's
Yeah,
not...
but it's not that far. And where her brother was living.
I don't. Is my microphone still working? Right. I don't know. Well, she wasn't. Oh God, what have I done? She wasn't.
Thank you.
She wasn't really. I mean, she wrote books, but I wouldn't have thought the Bloomsbury set is a different kettle of fish. I think. That's a question I haven't even thought to investigate. Sorry, I don't know the answer.
Okay, well, another one here. Excuse me, sir. Thank you very much.
Two quick comments. Yes, the Puffin Book of English Verse was on my shelf for many years. I don't know what's happened to it. It's probably gone to a cousin or something.
Yeah.
Secondly, the Puffin Puzzle Book by W.E. Gladstone. Now, he was a very competent Prime Minister, but...
I've no idea. Sorry, I didn't look into it. So,
Thank you. We have any more comments? Anyone else got anything to say? Anyone else? No? Okay, we've got a comment online, Joanna, which says, this is from Jennifer, the children who lived in a barn has been republished by Persephone Books. Persephone, my apologies. Persephone Books. I'm learning Spanish at the moment. Thanks, Joanna. That was very interesting. That's from Simon.
oh, great.
All right.
Okay.
Any other questions? No? Let's give Joanna a big round of applause for that. Thank you, Joanna, for your research.